Welcome, Taylor. I'm here with
Hi.
here with Taylor Morozova, and
Same,
yeah,
same.
yeah.
It's me.
And we met because you interviewed me on your podcast, the Weird Waves podcast, twice. Well, then I interviewed you in your podcast,
Hmm.
and that episode's also on this podcast.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah, I snatched it from you, and you are a hairdresser, so we wanted to talk about hair, which is very interesting to me because, like I was saying before we recorded, hair loss is a big concern that people come into my office with, mainly women, let's say, and yeah, and it's a tricky thing to treat, very very difficult to treat. Like you said, it's so dynamic to find out what could be leading to it, and it takes a while to steer the ship in the right direction. So it's hard to know if our efforts are working. And so, like, to identify the cause and then to reverse the cause and then see and evaluate if our assessment was correct is tricky. And yeah, so maybe you could start by talking a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself, and then we'll
Okay.
jump into hair.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, my name is Taylor. I am a hairdresser and makeup artist, and I am also now dabbling in event planning side of things for fashion. So, I started doing hair because I had gotten married and my husband was going to, he is in trucking and kind of had the idea of learning how to be a truck driver. And I was kind of like, well, I'm not the type, I'm not gonna just do nothing. So I was like, oh, I'll go to hair school. And I went to hair school in a kind of like in the hood because I didn't want to spend a lot of money. And so because of that, I was able to work with, um, I mean, all when I tell you all different types of people, I mean, there were homeless people coming in. There was like some, wealthy people that wanted to get their hair done at a hair school, but I had a dynamic education on a basis of hair. And I kind of developed through, I guess, a little bit of rejection within the hair community. I kind of developed my own way that I color, my own way that I sell products or retail products to clients. So from that, I've built up I don't know, a unique system of the way that I've done hair through trial and error. Um, which is I've worked at a big salon in the city. I've worked at kind of like a hipstery salon, and now I work for myself. So that's kind of where my background is. I'm a surfer. I went to school later in life, and excuse me, because of that, I don't know, I was kind of able to see hair this in this kind of way that I do think. So I am also a big hair nerd. So I'm very interested in things like pH, what are the active ingredients in colors and dyes, and what are ingredients in shampoos and hair, like these things that hair people are working with on a regular basis. I really educated myself about them. And so um now that's kind of how I do hair. I work for myself. I have a small studio inside of a doctor's office, which is kind of an interesting thing, but it all kind of, it's a good ecosystem to be a part of. And then I freelance as well, doing editorial and fashion, hair, and now makeup. So that's kind of
Mm. Yeah,
my
I see, like,
background.
on your Instagram there's like all like fashion shows and like very like production like things that you're working on. So that's really interesting. Yeah, I see there's like the fashion aspect,
Hmm.
the makeup, the hair, but then there's also this scientific aspect to it too. You're like working in a doctor's office, so probably getting referrals
Hmm.
maybe, or yeah, really, yeah. And then you're also curious about how things work. Like, you're like, okay, I'm not just concerned with the ends of the hair, but
Hmm.
the roots and where the hair's coming from and how that's impacting what I'm working with.
Yeah, so it is very interesting. Like, I think one of the best examples I got was when I was in beauty school, and one of my teachers was telling me that she did nails before she was a teacher in hair school. and she was saying that like your nails, skin, and hair, like your endocrine system, it's like a warning sign for your body that, like if something is going on, it might not be something bad,
Mm-hmm.
it could be something good, but it's like a change is occurring. Hair, skin, and nails, it kind of like shows you if a change is happening. And she was saying that she was giving a manicure to this client that she'd had for 5 years, and she came in, and at the like base of like, where her cuticles are growing out, with this like black line going across, like, yeah, faint line, but like it was like a weird thing. And she was like, you should probably go see your doctor. Like, this is not normal. And of course, the client freaked out and was like, you have to tell me what's wrong. And she's like, well, I don't know what's wrong. And that's something I've told you. And I tell all of my clients is like, I'm not a doctor. I cannot diagnose you. I cannot treat you. I can't interpret lab tests. But what I can do is see something that looks irregular to me, that you should go to somebody who is a specialist in this field and get it checked out. Well, she had cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the first sign, was this like giant change in her nail bed. And she's now okay and everything's fine. But
Mm-hmm.
like, there's important discourse that happens between a hairdresser or a nail person or a facialist, if you see someone regularly. So that's kind of interesting. And so kind of from that, I liked to dig deeper into those aspects of things. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's very true because like in medical education we learn about signs on the nails and hair, but we're not like it's almost like you're using it as like a screening device. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a regular checkup where someone's coming in, you're observing their hair. And often, especially with female pattern hair loss, like the telogen effluvium that just sort of is diffuse,
Mm-hmm.
so many patients will tell me the same story that their doctor will say like, oh, it looks fine, right? Because from a distance, it looks like you still have a whole head of
Mm-hmm.
hair, even though there's noticeable thinning to the person. And they'll often reference what their hairdresser thinks of the situation as almost the higher authority, because
Mm-hmm.
that's somebody that's more intimate with their hair and how it's been changing and
Mm-hmm.
the texture and the growth and and the follicle um, circumference and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's really interesting. Like it is a really important part of healthcare, hairdressing. And yeah.
It weirdly is, and I hope moving forward, as things like return more normal, that some sort of dialogue can be held, and like a very good doctor or a very good dermatologist will have like a repertoire with a hairdresser. Like,
Mm,
I can refer you to this person to
mm,
look into whatever. And like, um excuse me, I know a lot of hairdressers have that with like, injectors or something, because
yeah.
of like medical aesthetics come together, but it also does have a lot to do with like you as a person. Like, there's something that happens when you touch someone and
Mm,
start working on them, and with their hair or whatever, that they just open their whole everything to you.
mm,
And it's a very like intimate, and it's also a long time. Like, even a just a haircut, 30 to 45 minutes, that's a long time to just be one-on-one with a person.
mm,
Once a month, it's like so regular. You
mhm.
never see your doctor that often.
Yeah, right.
So,
Totally. Yeah.
um any any good doctor will at least take that into account and take the person seriously. And like, I think that I dealt with that. Like, I had bangs for a while, and like, my hairline here, like, it used to be right here, and I started like literally, like, the hair would just kind of disintegrate almost out of my scalp in my hands.
Mm,
And and people just were like, oh, it's stress. Like, even hairdressers, like, oh, it's just stress, it's just stress. Like, it's stress induced hair loss is most certainly a thing, like, definitely.
mhm,
But the more I looked into it, the more I realized that like stress induced hair loss mostly is like clumping. Like, it's like more clumping of hair, and it's less like small strands. And
mhm,
so from that, I had to be my own like advocate in that way, and I'm still figuring it out. It's been such a long time, but it's definitely gotten better. But I think usually if someone comes to me and, they're my first time client, what I do first of all is I have, no matter what, 1 hour like appointment. Even if it's just for a 30-minute haircut, it's always an hour because it's like 15 minutes at least of me like what do you like about your hair? What do you not like about your hair? Like what are you using? What kind of shampoo? Like all that stuff has to do with, how is your hair going to be in the best way that I can do, because like, yeah, okay, I can give you the same graduated bob that everybody else has, but then you can go to anybody else to get that same haircut for the most part.
Mm.
So that that's part of what I do. And then if there's any concerns, I usually say, okay, let's check, like, we'll make you another appointment for either a month or like if someone has longer hair, like 2 or 3 months afterwards, if it's a haircut. And I'll say, keep track of your like shower blobs, right? Or like your hairbrush, like start from today and clean your hairbrush out and then just check it every week or
Mhm.
every time you shower. And you can send me a picture of whatever, you know. And the other thing is when I start or if I start shampooing somebody and if I notice hair loss at the shampoo ball, that's another thing that's like, okay, like this is a lot. And I can tell because I'm,
Mm.
you know, I guess manipulating the hair or whatever. But I mean, most people lose between 50 and 100 hair strands per day. Most, that's like general. But there is a difference between the length of the hairs. So like if your hair is long and you're losing short hairs like me and they're mostly around your face, like this is an issue. This is
Mhm.
like a problem. Or if you're getting like lots of flyaways on top of your head, but they're a different texture than the rest of your hair, that's another issue too. Like some people will come in, they'll literally have like random like black hairs that are coily and they look like so different from the texture of their other hair, and you can tell that they're new growth because they're really short. It's like, okay, that's like there's something happening. and
Mm.
and I can't say for sure what it is, but
Mhm.
usually let's start by seeing like, don't panic is usually the thing, and let's like go into it afterwards. And the other thing that's interesting is a lot of people will say like, oh my god, my hair's so frizzy. And what it is actually like new growth. So
Mhm.
I'll say like, were you experiencing hair loss like 6 months ago? And they might say like, usually they say, oh yeah. Or like, I was really stressed out. I was going through blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wow, you have like a bunch of new growth. And that's actually your frizz. It's
Right.
not frizz. It's just you have a bunch of baby hairs on the top of your head. And then what happens is people want to control frizz. So then they put a bunch of product on top of those baby hairs and like they have not keratinized yet, which
Mhm.
is like the keratin it hardens over time. Like when your hair first comes out of your head, like right here, about the first inch of growth, it has very weak keratin. It's like soft. And
Mhm.
then as your hair grows down your head, it gets harder and it hardens and it kind of becomes like stiff. And then by the time it gets to your ends, like this is kind of like old keratin on your ends that can feel like kind of crusty if you don't take care
Yeah.
of it, get haircuts
The
and stuff.
dry ends, yeah. Mhm.
So you know, if you're putting a bunch of product on your frizz, you can, there's a lot of issues. You can like smother the follicle, or you can like kind of cause like a coating so that the baby hairs won't properly like keratinize and they won't grow out in a nice way. They'll kind of like get all weird. So addressing those
Mhm.
from the beginning.
Mm.
And then from there, we can go into like, what are you putting on your hair? And the other thing, like you and I have talked about, is like castor oil, almond oil, and people are putting these things on their hair. They're like smothering their baby hairs, their
Mm.
follicles. You know, they're using. They might be using Rogaine when it's not appropriate. Like I'm not against Rogaine.
Mhm.
I think that there's definitely a time and place for that. It's one of the only FDA approved or like clinically researched like that actually regrows hair. Um,
Yeah.
but if you're using it when your hair follicles are already dead, you're just kind of like potentially disrupting your hormones for no reason. Um, so, that's part of it too. And the marketing is very tricky with hair loss because it's such a problem. There's like thickening shampoos. And like thickening shampoos, it doesn't I think people with finer texture hair that are experiencing hair loss usually go for thickening shampoos and conditioners or treatments or scalp treatments. It's like, well, a scalp balancing shampoo and conditioner only helps if the problem with your hair loss comes from your scalp. It's like contact dermatitis, seborrheic dermatitis, like these types of issues on your actual scalp. Like if that's your problem, or dandruff.
Mm.
And like if dandruff is causing hair loss, then you need a zinc dandruff shampoo once a week, leave it on, and then follow with moisture, and then that's your issue and it'll be solved. Or if you need like a pH balancing spray because you have some sort of bizarre allergy and you've got a seborrheic dermatitis, and those type of products will help you. But like all these, like right now everybody's coming up with a scalp serum. That's like the vibe right now.
Yeah.
It's like scalp products for everybody, and like all the packaging is
Nutrition for
similar.
the scalp.
A
Yeah.
scalp scrub, and like that's cool. I use it for some of my clients, but like do I really need to sell it to most people? No, they don't really even need that. But it's like a purposely misleading subject. Like same thing with thickening, it or densifying. It's like, no, it's not going to regrow your hair. It just, it expands the outside of your hair to make it feel like you have actually more hairs on your head, and make your hair have the illusion of fullness and thickness. They're great products, like especially for someone who they have fine textured hair, they've had it their whole life, and they want a solution for that. But what it is not is a way to tackle a hair loss issue.
Hmm.
So I think that that becomes an issue. You know, people flock to Ulta and then they buy like um, Sky High Volume, for example, is a Redken shampoo, which is awesome for someone who has really fine textured hair, but it's definitely not good for somebody who's experiencing hair loss because it's very drying. So the potential of exacerbating the issue that's already there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know a lot of them add salt, which is kind of like makes the hair follicle stick up a little bit
Yep.
to give more sort of like beachy vibes. But yeah, and I think okay, so really like there's a difference between hair thickness and hair density, right?
Yes.
Maybe you want to go into that a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So density is the amount. I think there's an exact formula. I don't know what it is, but it's like the amount. It's like the hairs per square footage on your head
Yeah.
kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
like
Per
there's not
square
an
like
exact
acre.
science, uh,
Mhm.
but it's basically thick and thin. Or we say in the hair world like high and low density. So like um it's the amount of hairs per like whatever square inch on your head. So it's literally the amount of physical hairs on your head is density. And then thickness is like the diameter of the actual hair strand. It's like the outside. And that can also get kind of categorized even more into like the outside of the hair and stuff like that. But the easiest way to deal with it is to talk about, thickness and density. And then the third one is texture. So texture is also, it's everybody has some sort of texture. It's like maybe low texture, maybe highly textured, like coiled or whatever. But like, for example, like if someone has an afro or they're like wearing an afro hairstyle, right? They have extremely low density hair. They actually don't have a lot of hairs on their head. Or sorry, they have a lot of hairs on their head, but the hair is very fine in texture because curly hair is usually finer, just because of the genetics that comes with it. It's like if someone has thick, high density, highly textured hair, there's a lot of hair. There's
Mhm.
a absolute lot of hair, and it is absolutely the exception. So the other thing is like I have high density hair. I have a lot of hair, but the strands are kind of fine. It's like
Mhm.
medium to fine. If I had like absolutely thick hair, I'd have like a huge ponytail.
Mhm.
The example is usually like Indian hair,
Mhm.
is like high density, high thickness. It's like
Mhm.
huge ponytail.
Mhm. Yeah, I have the same as
So
you. I have high density, or I did before a
yeah,
lot of hair loss, and low thickness, like very fine, thin
yeah,
hair.
finer strands. So
Yeah.
then when you get a thickening shampoo, or a densifying shampoo, like a densifying shampoo makes you feel like you have more hairs on your head. A
Mhm.
thickening shampoo like puffs up the actual follicle on your hair,
Mhm.
to make it feel like or look as though you have thicker hair than what you actually have. So
Mhm.
it's a great, but none of these products are going to regrow your hair. Like zero of them are.
Mhm.
They get away with it by not claiming that on the, or like loosely claiming it, but you know.
And I think like at the level of wanting your hair to look better, people might not care necessarily because maybe they haven't distinguished between the differences. And so, like what I see in my office, people will come in. I'm dealing with a lot of hair loss, and sometimes it's they're upset at the physical losing hair, like seeing a lot of hair come out in the
Mhm,
shower when they're brushing. Sometimes they notice thinning overall, like their ponytail thickness
mhm,
is decreased, which I always ask that question. It's like, an important question to ask, like, is your ponytail diameter smaller?
mhm.
And then are there any like spots that you're noticing, like any areas of thinning? And often they've tried like a hair, skin, nail supplement.
Yeah.
That's another thing too. It's like they're taking something with biotin or silica or something like that,
Mhm.
and it hasn't worked, right?
And
Which
most of them
it's
don't work because you have to, in order, sorry if I cut you off, but like
no,
in order for biotin to actually work, you have to really have like a legitimate biotin deficiency in order for those to work. And like, the
that
reason
has to
like
be the reason. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And the other thing is like the reason why people take prenatal vitamins, they're like, oh, my hair is growing like crazy. It's like they were probably deficient. Like a prenatal vitamin is just like a multivitamin. And there's
yeah.
a really good chance that that person was actually just deficient in one of those things that's in the multivitamin. And so their hair is growing like crazy. And that's not bad. They shouldn't not take that. But a lot of people take prenatal vitamins and like break out, or like biotin. If your body doesn't need biotin, it will start coming out like in your pores and stuff. You'll break out. Um,
Yeah, you can get
Similar,
cystic acne from high dose biotin. Yeah.
right, and similar with collagen. Collagen is a little bit different, but there's only certain types of, I believe the bovine, so like from beef is like the best kind of collagen that you can have, and it's good because it's kind of like a protein source, and so all over like it's a good like kind of super food in the way that can
Mm-hmm.
impact your hair, but it's like if you're already having hair, it just intensifies like the health of it. So it kind of makes it like
Hmm.
healthier. Eating more protein is gonna make your hair a little bit stronger. But all of that is it's like already with like the follicles that are on your head that are actively working. Like it's not really going to regrow hair that has fallen out if you have like a hair loss issue. But sometimes that's just enough to make people feel good about their hair loss, and so they stop stressing about it. And the stress of hair loss also like
Right.
exacerbates the issue of hair loss, which is why it can take so long to treat it, because then you're like, oh my god, my hair's falling out. And I know that because I went through it. But what else is an issue is people telling you, oh, it's just stress, and then you like
Hmm.
are like, it's a cycle where like I'm freaking out for no reason. If I just stop thinking about it, blah blah blah. It's like, no, like let it be.
Yeah.
Even if you figure out what the problem is, it's the hair phase, or the length of like the growth cycle for hair is like 3 to 9 months, depending on how your specific cycle goes. And so, no matter what, you can almost guarantee it's going to take at least 6 months for you to like
Hmm.
truly see and understand and notice a difference, like an actual difference.
Yeah.
So that becomes difficult as well.
This is like the bane of my existence when we're working with hair loss, because you kind of have to pick a strategy, an
Hmm.
informed strategy to go with based on what, and maybe I'll like lay out the types of hair loss to like the big types, and then we'll
Hmm.
dive into that. But you lay out a strategy, like I think this is what's going on. Here's the supplements, here's the herbs, here's the lifestyle stuff. And I check in more frequently than 6 months, but basically we're waiting for 6 months for a real turnaround to see if what we're doing is working, which is tough because if what we're doing isn't working, 6 months have gone by. So that's a tricky thing. And then, yeah, if you're stressing the whole time counting hairs, it's really difficult because you're
Hmm.
adding to a potential input that's affecting hair loss.
Hmm.
But basically, okay, so basically there's telogen effluvium, probably the most common kind, diffuse throughout the whole head, related to nutrient deficiency stress. So basically, the hairs all entered the telogen phase, which is like the end stage of the hair cycle, and it all falls out at the same time. And it usually happens like, yeah, like 3 to 6 months after a nutrient deficiency, a significant amount of weight loss, a significant stressor, and that's where like iron deficiency, vitamin D, possibly biotin, maybe collagen if the person is like went on like a low protein diet or something. And then you have uh, androgenic alopecia, which is sort of the female pattern hair loss or the male pattern hair loss. Usually thinning temples,
Mm-hmm.
like what I'm dealing with,
Yeah, me too.
mentioned. Yeah.
Yep.
And so usually like the crown is thinning. And this is difficult. There's like a genetic component to this. Although I want to say this though, I did listen to a podcast where they were talking about this, and they were saying that androgenic alopecia is sort of in someone's genetics and
Mm-hmm.
then can be influenced by the environment. It's like the accumulation of a hormone called DHT that essentially like
Yes.
ends the follicle, like it's dead. It's thin, it's thinner now, and then maybe even the follicle's done, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
get it back. You can't wake it up again. But what he did say was like somebody's journey towards androgenic alopecia is going to potentially be in their DNA and their genetics,
Mm-hmm.
but a bout of telogen effluvium will accelerate it.
Uh-huh.
And so often, like dealing with it from a telogen effluvium perspective is helpful, um, because really like you're because basically like you're accelerating the end of that hair follicle cycle and
Mm-hmm.
the life cycle of the follicle. So those are the two main kinds. Then there's also autoimmune alopecia, which is usually like again induced by stress, usually like
Circles.
patches and
Mm-hmm.
circles. And then you also mentioned, yeah, like fungal overgrowth and psoriasis and things like that, like issues with the scalp itself. So yeah, those are the main types. And so probably most people listening are either dealing with some sort of androgenic alopecia or telogen effluvium,
Yeah,
or combination. Yeah.
and with androgenic alopecia, like there are products within like different ranges that have like DHT blocking like serums and sprays and stuff like that. And those are actually really great. That's one of the products that I retail in like to clients as, I'll say like, let's give it a month, give it 2 months, and then let's give this a go. And sometimes I have some clients, like I have some male clients that I'm like, I just want to see like how this works for you and specifically. So I'm gonna like give it to you at cost or like whatever. And I kind of like use them as my like
Yeah.
see how this works with this product or this product. And they're into it and they provide good feedback. And it's just interesting to see. But like the DHT blocking things are great. They stop the hair loss, but they don't regrow hair. And I think that that's the thing is like sometimes you are not going to regrow the hair, but that's the kind of the marker that people are looking for in solving like the hair loss issue. It's like that shouldn't be the goal. Like I was that way too, where now I'm kind of like I've given up on the edges of my hairline. Like it's just I don't think it's going to come back. It might, and that's cool. But as long as I notice that I'm pulling out less like tiny hairs, especially around my face, that's a good that means I'm like at least on the right track. And those things you can see earlier than 6 months usually. It
Mhm.
means that the loss in itself is like diminishing, but the regrowth is what takes such a long time. And that tends to be like the goalpost when it really shouldn't be.
Right. Yeah. Like you want to see your hair density back, and it's like, but you might after like 6 months have a baby hair of about 6 inches.
Especially with long hair,
Yeah.
especially with long hair.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's too like it is so dramatic going to the shower and seeing like so much hair in the bottom of the drain when you're and like for example, you have a long my hair is super freaking long. Like I don't know if
Yeah.
you can
Yeah. Yeah.
see this, but like my hair is so long. So when this fills up
Yeah.
um the shower, it's a lot, but I also have to like recognize like how much is like a lot or
Hmm.
is it just take up a lot of space, like
Right. Is it a lot of strands, or is it a lot of? It's just a lot of hair.
yeah.
'Cause- yeah.
So and there's other things too where you can see like did the bulb come out, like did your hair pluck out and like the whole follicle is like right there, like
Hmm.
that's not good. Like I used to see that a lot in places that was doing like extensions, like extensions for hair are so I'm kind of on the fence about them because first of all it's a little bit odd to take someone else's hair and put it into your own, like put it and wear it as your own hair, like it's a little bit odd. But I also think that um it can be one of those things where like people that are experiencing hair loss, they get a little bit of extensions put in and the stress levels because their confidence goes up. So it's like a cost benefit analysis that you have to do. But there's another side of extensions where like you can kind of see, is this causing like hair loss? Is this causing traction alopecia, which will literally be like bald spots in the head of like physically the like you're killing the follicle, which is like, it's self-induced traction alopecia, which is one of the things I talk about the most. Like,
Mhm.
especially like the Black community suffers from traction alopecia more than any other like,
Mhm.
group of people, at least in the United States, because of ponytails and also braiding. So like too tight of braids, too tight of ponytails, too tight of hairstyles can cause traction alopecia, along with like you see it a lot in like female softball players or track runners where they're wearing a headband right on the hairline, and
Mhm.
then they're sweating and the sweat is trapping under the
Yeah.
headband and like suffocating those hair follicles around the face. So it's a little bit different than like traction alopecia from the hair being pulled back, but it's kind of like the headband moving across the head. So that's with extensions, you can kind of see like if you're taking out an extension and there's some regular hair loss that it's just like regular shedding, it's trapped in the extension. That's one thing that's like, okay, but if you take out the extension and there's like a
Mhm.
huge big follicle, like a big kind of thing of skin stuck to the, looks like a
Yeah.
little plug or something. And that is not from regular hair loss. That is like
Like
some,
damage, like
that's
physical
damage. Yeah, that's like the
follicles.
extension was ripping hair out of your head.
Yeah. Well, I know you talked about this with surfing because we wear hooded wetsuits in the winter and fall,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
like you mentioned that for traction alopecia, and you can feel it, especially a wave pulling pressure on the hood backwards
Yes.
and the neoprene. And I do think that that is been a problem for my hair for sure. And like you recommended two braids just to kind of
Yeah.
have the follicles at least down.
Yep.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and also so that like it kind of gives it more space to move. So like for
Hmm.
example, when I'm running, I used to run in a ponytail. I don't as much anymore because my ends were kind of tangling together, but also they like everything is only moving from one like point of contact, where if you have just simply two braids and they're loose, kind of gives it a little more freedom for the hair to move around.
Yeah.
But also like once you put your hood on, these baby hairs kind of have some place to go, where if it's slicked back in a tight bun, the more pressure you put on it, the more it moves and the more traction causes on your hairline. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like putting it one.
Swimmers deal with this too,
Yeah.
wearing the swimming cap if the
Right.
swim cap's not put on properly.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people can probably identify with that. Like, just feel even like winter, like toques that are tight, or like beanies, I guess in the States, but like
mhm.
just anything that's sort of pulling on the hair and maybe causing friction or like is tight. Yeah. Um, and that's difficult, I think. And usually, so what you would probably see there though is that it's around the hairline that
Mhm.
there's thinning, and it's not in this like so the androgenic alopecia is like an M pattern,
Right.
thins at the temples, like the
Mhm.
widow's peak kind of thing. Um, and that there's just thinning at the crown. And then there is diffuse thinning, like someone's
Mhm.
ponytail will be smaller.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
The traction alopecia, it's usually both around the hairline, but it's also like specifically here. So like the whatever
uh,
sideburns or something get kind of like pulled up, and
uh-huh.
then also behind the head as well. So like
Right.
everybody has those like wild like hairs that kind of don't like, what are they even doing?
Mhm.
But when that starts to gravitate inwards, um kind of around the whole hairline, then that is kind of a sign of like, okay, hey. And usually I'll say to people like, you know, traction alopecia is not usually reversible for the most part, because
Mhm.
the traction has damaged the follicle like
Mhm.
to the point where it might just not be alive. That's at least been my experience. Again, like I
Mhm.
haven't done studies on this. I am not a doctor by any means. I'm not,
Mhm.
qualified in that way. But from what I've seen in my clients, is um, most of the time, traction alopecia, it doesn't grow back, like, especially if it's been a really long time. However, there are things that you can do to lessen your likelihood of killing, like fully killing all of those follicles. So, one of the things is like if you wear a ponytail regularly or you tie your hair back regularly, just try to move the location around. So like I
Mhm.
was wearing a lot, called it my thinking bun, but I would like pull my hair all the way up like this. Well, that pulls right in this area where I'm getting that hair loss, right? So that exacerbates the issue. So what I should do instead is sometimes have a bun up here, then have one in the middle, then have one down, and then wear two buns. Kind of like rotate your hairstyles a little bit so that it doesn't, you know,
Mhm.
just keep getting hit at the same time. Like you're wearing a slick back ponytail again, you're wearing a slick like JoJo Siwa, for example.
Mhm.
Traction alopecia, like big time.
Yeah.
And you can see it. And she's young. She's like 19. Got
Mhm.
that slick back ponytail, huge bow on there,
Yeah.
and she wears her ponytail on one side, and you can actually look at her hairline and see
Mhm.
that it's rising because of traction alopecia. And
Yeah.
there's hairdressers that have done full like YouTube videos on it. Like
Really?
JoJo Siwa needs to stop wearing this fucking ponytail because of traction alopecia. Like
Or
she's
just like
so
put it on the
young.
other side. Yeah.
Yeah, just move it around, like use a different product. It's like
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah, it's tough because yeah, especially when it's that tight and it's yeah slicked back. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
This is interesting. I mean, and this is also like looking at from the perspective of it could be combined things. So if someone's dealing with androgenic alopecia,
Uh-huh.
and then you're also wearing your hair a certain way, you're adding on
Yeah,
traction
you're
alopecia.
exacerbating it.
Perhaps the hair follicle is already weakened, it's already thin,
Mm-hmm.
and now or the diameter is thinner, and so now like you're kind of it's more susceptible as well to the traction alopecia, and that sort of ends it. And so it's going in the opposite direction of what you want, which is to stop that loss,
Yeah.
possibly encourage regrowth if you can. But um, what maybe like you also mentioned about shampooing and like hair care and how someone
Mm-hmm.
can work with that. Like you talked about castor oil and oils and things like that not being. I remember last time we talked too. I was like, I recommend castor oil all the time, and and you mentioned like yeah, it's like it's too thick.
It's too thick.
Yeah,
So castor oil is interesting. Another one I've been looking into recently is like rosemary oil, like an essence, not the essential
yeah.
oil, because essential oil is like the way I'm not exactly sure the specifics of it, but it's not super regulated where they're coming from and like how it's processed with essential oil. So that's the only kind of like
Mm-hmm.
iffy thing. But like be it like rosemary oil or essence or something like that, it has kind of like scientific properties of like scalp stimulation and potential hair like support. But the same thing with castor oil, like something within castor oil can activate like or help support like
Mm-hmm.
struggling hair follicles, but castor oil in itself is too thick.
Mm-hmm.
And there's huge potential for like you're rubbing it and smearing it around your hairline, but because it's so thick, it's like it's aggravating those like baby hairs in there. Again, like they haven't keratinized, so even if you're not dealing with any sort of problem, they're super fragile. So if you cut it with like a looser oil, like I recommended sweet almond oil, is very loose and kind of smells nice. Like castor oil is really thick and like kind of gloppy, but you can
Yeah.
like still get um the actives or like whatever the thing in castor oil that can stimulate like the hair support if you cut it with sweet almond oil, and like it looks less like you've just like slapped tar on the side of your head
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
than if you just put straight castor oil on there. So it's like this is where what's interesting is where like the idea of like science medicine and like the practical
Right.
like kind of skilled worker need to have this combined togetherness, because like not like you weren't wrong in recommending castor oil, you were absolutely like right on the money, but like the application of the topical product is like you know
Yeah. The
right on the
actual
money,
on the
like
ground
yeah.
practice of it doesn't work for your
Exactly.
yeah.
And the other thing, this is an issue that I've ran into with people going to dermatologists. Like dermatologists, from a perspective of like a Western medicine, is like eliminate all potential risk, and then like it's super extreme. So usually if someone's dealing with like a scalp issue or a hair loss issue, instantly they want, I forgot what it's called, but it's like free and clear. It's like scented, no perfume, basic shampoo and conditioner. Well, it's so drying to the
Uh-huh.
hair. It is so drying to the hair. And then it strips color, it does all these things. So it creates a whole another problem, which is like the aesthetic. problem. It's like your hair doesn't feel the same, your hair doesn't look the same. So not only are you dealing with hair loss, but your hair has lost its luster, your color looks like shit, and you have to come into the salon more regularly, which is also none of that is good.
Well, it's
So there
adding to
are
the stress, as you mentioned, which is going to exacerbate the hair loss because you
exactly
feel worse about yourself versus the thickening shampoo, which isn't solving the root issue, but maybe is giving you more confidence, making you
right.
feel a little bit better about your
And
hair.
and in some ways, like as long as you're not looking for it to like solve your problem, for the most part, there's some of them that are really drying, and that's like hair is, I think it's like 70% water. So like it needs everybody needs moisture. So like um that can also be counterintuitive, but certainly not free and clear, whatever that stuff is called. Like, oh my gosh, and it happened
Yeah.
to me. Like when I was experiencing hair loss too, it was like, oh, just try this. And it was like I did it for a couple of days, and it was like really just not wasn't good. So
Yeah, and it would be relevant only in the case. I mean, what they're aiming for with that, it sounds like, is that there might be some chemical additive that's aggravating the scalp and
or
causing
allergy,
irritation and allergy. Exactly.
yeah,
That's not really a main, I wouldn't say, source of hair loss in most people, especially like if you would have some dermatitis of the scalp,
right,
right? And it's not necessarily going to be contributing to the autoimmune alopecia either, which is more like has a genetic component and an autoimmune component and very stress susceptible component. Like most people will experience some hair loss with that condition after a significant amount of stress. So
yeah.
this is sort of like a very side diagnosis that may not be relevant, you know?
Exactly. And the other thing that's quite interesting is when you talk about allergies, is like the one of the biggest allergies that people have, and it can like uh I can't think of what it's called, but it's an overexposure allergy. When you're like
Uh,
taking in too much of something and then you get an allergy to it because of
right.
that. Coconut is one of those ingredients that like people become extremely allergic to coconut.
Mhm.
Well, sulfate-free shampoos are actually just they make a sodium lauryl sulfate out of coconut, so it's cocoa lauryl sulfate. It's almost the exact
Yeah, it's all
it's
the
almost
parts, the reasons that you don't want it is still there.
exactly,
Yeah.
but it's with coconut and people are freaking allergic to coconut.
Mm,
And so what happens is, especially like with the curly girl method, which like in essence has a good backing behind it, but also is like super rigid. It's like people experiencing extreme hair loss because of that. Well, they're allergic to coconut, and
what
they
is
might not have been when they started,
the
but like,
mess is when you're just washing your hair with like coconut?
no, it's a pro sulfate free, like
Okay. Uh-huh.
paraben free, silicone
Mhm.
free, whatever. Where with a lot of people, like silicones, they there's a way to deal with them. Like they're not natural. It is basically plastic. But if you've been dealing with that for so long and then you switch it up and then you have hair problems,
Mhm.
this is an issue.
Mhm.
Like really this is a problem, and there's a lot of like marketing
Mhm.
around it that becomes very predatory, like Monet, for example. I don't know if you've heard of that hair care company. This is like a direct sales, multi-level marketing type of company. And like their shampoos are extremely high on the pH scale. Some of them are like 12 and 13, which is basically like a chemical relaxer, just like a low grade, but the pH is so high. And people experience after a certain amount of time hair loss with that because when it starts, like the pH kind of like relaxes the outside of your hair and make
Mhm.
your hair look really smooth and soft. And then over time, it's a super harsh chemical. Like, so over time, it aggravates your hair and starts hair loss. Well, they're telling people, oh, that's just your scalp detoxing. It's like, no,
Oh no.
no, no, it does not do that. And that's like the people that are selling you the shampoo they're saying that to people. It's like, I think there's a class action lawsuit against them. There's another one against Diva Curl, which is, excuse me, super interesting. But it's kind of, it goes along those lines. So like
Mhm.
people that have suffered with their hair and trying to find the best solutions for their hair have created these communities, and the communities become so kind of like self isolated that the problems that exist are not taken seriously. So that's something with some of my curly haired clients that I um you know find with them. It's like uh they have a curl cream that they absolutely love, but they were told by somebody that because it has parabens in it, that they shouldn't use it and they should use something else. But ever since they use something else, it doesn't work as good. So they have to use way more of it and it's weighing down. It's just like this
Mm,
issue. So it's like, okay, well, sometimes it can just be as simple as like, let's just try something else. Like,
mhm.
let's just literally
Switch up your products or
switch
your
up your products.
shampoo.
Yeah, like try like I like silicones. Like my hair likes silicones. I've only found so far one or two like silicone free shampoo that I actually like. It's super expensive. It's what I retail in my salon to most of my clients, and I've kind of whittled it down to weed out the bullshit. But most people need like one of three or four offerings of shampoo and conditioner. Everything else is really just like
Mhm.
extra and over the top. So, yeah.
Mhm. It's interesting, yeah, because that's this is another good topic, especially in more of like a natural health podcast. Because I know you've spoken about this before, that the natural shampoos are not necessarily better, that they don't remove buildup as well, and
Mhm.
that also can be an issue for the hair and the scalp, and that the pH, and maybe you can talk about that. The pH is really important, and they often
Yeah.
don't achieve a low enough pH.
Yeah, so what the best way to like the simplest way to break down like the hair care world is kind of like sulfate free in that kind of realm, and then the like silicone and like more traditional shampoo. So like what a shampoo does from like the very very basic is that it creates like has a soaping agent in it, which is like either a sulfate or a cocoa sulfate or some sort of soaping agent that causes, when mixed with water, to make a suds, and that suds in within the molecules, oil, dirt, and grease kind of get attracted to these whatever this soaping agent is, and then when you rinse it with water it all comes out and your hair is left kind of the way that it is. Some
Mhm.
are stronger, like I don't know if in Canada you have like VO5 or I don't know if
Maybe.
like this
Yeah.
white rain is one of them. Here's like 99 cents. Like, yeah, that's strong as hell. None of your natural oils are going to be left when you're done with that baby. And like, it's super intense. So then to the, like kind of the complement to that, um, is the conditioner, which you need to use. Like, this is another issue that people come, and my hair is so greasy. It's like, okay, well, your hair, skin and nails, or anything on your body, the natural pH is like 4.5 to 5.5, right? So it's slightly acidic on like the scale of
Mhm.
acid base. And
The neutral is 7, so that's
right,
quite acidic. Yeah, yeah,
right. So and water is a 7, right? So even
yeah.
if you're only rinsing your hair with water, your hair is going to have like your body's oil is regulated to naturally balance your scalp out. Like your body is constantly trying to like self-regulate your pH on your face, on your body, and especially on your scalp. So if you're only shampooing, or if you're using like a shampoo with a high pH and not using conditioner, then of course your hair is going to be oily because your body is like, man, this is not a perfect environment for me. Like, I
Mhm.
need to produce a bunch of oil because there's something like stressing out the pH of my hair. So then where a conditioner comes in is it has the um lower pH. So the shampoo raises the pH above 7, usually like an 8 or 9. Some pH balanced shampoos will say it'll be like a 7, but it's still high, So then you use the conditioner, which has a lower pH, and it's even lower than your natural state to kind of like counterbalance the highness of the shampoo. And so you need both of them together. That's how they work. That's how they're designed to work. It's like, we can get into like no poo or apple cider vinegar kind of later. But if we're just talking about shampoo and conditioner, like that's how it's designed. And so in the conditioner, one of the like smoothing agents or the pH balancing agents is silicone, or you can get, I think that the more sulfate free versions have like different butters. So you've got coconut butter, shea butter, almond butter, kind of those emollients of
Yeah.
different kinds, and they kind of work in different ways. Like they either coat the outside of your hair in a more permanent way, or they kind of temporarily coat the outside of your hair and then kind of like dissipate with heat. That's like the more natural ones. So in the natural world, there's plenty of really good products, but they need to be only used with natural products. So like
Mm,
um the issue is when you're mixing like, if you're using, I can't think of a brand right now, but like for example, Kevin Murphy, like I use Kevin Murphy and it's a sulfate free, mostly has a little light silicone. And those shampoos can kind of break down a little bit of silicone, but if you're using that shampoo, that conditioner, and then like, a hairspray from Aussie or Garnier, which has like a bunch of alcohol, hard silicones in it, whatever, it's not going to break that down. Like it's not um designed to be worked with that. So it's going to cause buildup on your hair. Similar thing can happen with silicone and sulfate shampoos and conditioners. So there's kind of this thing like people are using the more traditional shampoos and they're like, oh, well, it just stopped working, like it just, my
right.
hair got used to it. So I had to switch it up. It's like, no, you just need to remove the buildup of your hair. You either weren't shampooing for long enough, or for whatever reason, you need to like switch up only the shampoo, not the conditioner. So
Mm,
I always like, I think I have a bottle of like Amika shampoo, which is a good shampoo, but it's kind of like tougher. So maybe like twice a month I'll just shampoo with that and then use my regular conditioner, and it cleanses like the buildup off of my hair. It's a harsher shampoo, but it kind of like pushes the reset button on
yeah.
that. So there there is a misconception with lots of things that like natural is like the better way. And it's not necessarily the better way. It can be one option, but like if you've been dealing with or using like sulfates and silicone shampoos for such a long time and then you switch it up, that's when there really can be problems
Mhm.
sometimes. And then just going back to it, it kind of fixes them. Like I don't know, I've been using Kevin Murphy for a really long time. And then I went to my parents last week and I used whatever, I don't even know, some hotel shampoo. And I was like, oh, my hair's so shiny. Well, it's like ass load of silicones,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it makes your hair look so shiny. Um,
Yeah.
or people will use like a natural shampoo and conditioner and then some oil that they found. Well, those like serums or oils, like half of them are just like silicone. They're
Right.
just really silicone cut with like some other kind of oil. Um,
I use them to prevent like stuff getting into, like if I'm swimming a lot,
yeah,
like
yeah,
a coating so that stuff doesn't penetrate the clothes. Yeah.
exactly.
It's
Yep.
like the only thing that works for that for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's great if you're swimming or
Mhm.
surfing, or you don't want, things to come out of your hair. Eventually it will like wash away with water for the most part, but
Yeah.
that's over an extended amount of time, and it definitely delays the process of that. So
Yeah. Like one of those little like serum things just for summertime because otherwise it's like fried. No.
oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And it's like everything in moderation too,
Mhm.
like if you're um I don't know, like I don't hate the idea of using a serum on like the ends of your hair because
Mhm.
it's not really touching your scalp. And I think
Right.
a lot of these products should be used like from here down. If you have really short hair, like you might need to use some sort of styling agent or like thickening agent or something like that, but you don't really need a smoothing
You're right. Yeah, because your
agent.
roots or your ends are fresh, anyways, relatively
Yeah.
compared to. And it's interesting too when you talk about the natural. So I'm always like torn because from an environmental medicine perspective, you're like, do I want to be like exposing myself to parabens? But then from an allergy perspective, um, a lot of natural ingredients promote like overexposure allergies, just like you mentioned. Like coconut is a big one. All essential oils can be irritating whether you're allergic to them or not. And beeswax is another one, maybe not so related to hair, but it's another one where people develop overexposure allergies to it. And so often there's actually a website that a dermatologist put together called the skincare elimination diet, and she just has these products that don't have irritants in them, and very few of them are natural because you know things like Vaseline are going to be pretty like neutral to the skin and not cause allergic reactions. If you're having a flare up of eczema, but you're putting a beeswax or possibly essential oil based thing on your skin, it's going to be horrible. Sometimes you just need something there to like keep moisture in and just let the skin heal. And so it seems like the same way with hair that if you're going a more natural route, there's certain ingredients that you probably do need to have that may not be natural even in those products, or even their substitution products may not be better for you health wise, like the cocoa lauryl sulfate. Is that better than sodium lauryl sulfate?
still
And
highly processed, and it's
yeah,
definitely not natural, but it's natural enough that they can claim that it is natural. And even like
right.
some of these natural, like I follow a girl on Instagram that I actually really like. She's a fashion blogger. And but she has Lyme disease, and so she's dealing with, trying to deal with like autoimmune issues and all these problems. So we talk about hair color, and she's sent me a lot of, we kind of had some discussion.
Mm,
Oh, you should look into this color because I'm very sensitive to smells and blah blah blah. Well, when you dig deeper into it, it's kind of bullshit, and like it's kind
mm,
of, I think it should be illegal. A lot of the things that people are claiming, like, I have somebody that works with like org organic, it's literally called like organic nail spa or like organic hair salon. It's like, and so people are going there, and they might not be the most, they might not be digging in enough, but they're like at least kind of like health conscious, or like they want to do things in a more natural way. And so they are sitting down and they think they're getting like natural hair dye put on them, and they're not. It's just
yeah.
does not exist. Even henna, and it's extremely difficult to find like a pure henna dye. Most of it has metallic dyes. I don't work with anyone's hair that's had henna put onto it because it can cause a chemical reaction, um, excuse me, between my products. But that's
Mm,
kind of where it becomes a little bit difficult. Like I would much rather have somebody say, I'm concerned about the chemicals in my shampoo. So I've decided to do the no poo thing. Like, will you
mhm.
just rinse my hair with water? Yes, if I'm not doing color. Like, if I'm doing color, there's, something's got to give. I got to get those chemicals off your scalp. Like, I'm the hairdresser that's like, do the no shampoo thing. Like, I think that's awesome. Apple cider vinegar rinses, they totally work. They
Mhm.
worked for me when I was dealing with contact dermatitis on my scalp. Um, because it's pH balance. Like it helps you to
Mhm.
balance your pH. It's super acidic, and yeah, you smell like vinegar,
Salad. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Smell like a salad, but it dissipates after a couple of hours, and
Mhm.
it's super natural, super good for you. You should really do vinegar rinse your whole body, like
Yeah.
it's like so good for your skin because it helps to balance after being in a shower, especially in winter. Like you go in like a steaming hot shower, and then
Yeah.
like at the very last minute you just put a little vinegar on your body and then get out. It's like, oh, your skin will be so happy, instead of like hammering your body with a pH 7 of water, which everyone's
Mm,
water is usually a little higher just because of all the things that are in our water.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, so
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point too. The apple cider vinegar is interesting. I was going to ask about that too because I mean, and also it smooths the hair follicles too and
oh
create
yeah.
that softness. Yeah.
Yeah, but don't buy the products. That's, I always tell people like that it was another trend, kind of like these scalp serums. It's like, oh, Redken has a apple cider vinegar rinse. It's like, why?
Right.
Just
Well, this
literally
right.
like
Yeah,
that
you're
was
like you can just get in a grocery store for $2 for some no.
exactly.
Actually, that was what I was gonna say. Is I was at my parents' house and I was just looking at a bottle of natural shampoo, but it was like from a commercial brand, right? So it wasn't necessarily a company that tries really hard to be all natural and just combines aloe and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and it said whatever 99 point million percent natural ingredients, and I looked to, and then with a little asterisk. So I looked to see what the asterisk means from a Health Canada sort of perspective, how they can make that claim. And it's like an ingredient is deemed natural if it's derived from a natural source or if it's made chemically in a lab but is at least 50% what a natural version of that chemical would
Yeah,
be. And I was like, how much further away from the natural chemical is it than 50%? It seems like
right.
it's just anything goes then. It didn't seem like there's anything more natural about that definition than just random chemicals that you would find in like Pantene or something.
Yeah, it's hard to this is where like the, again, kind of, we briefly touched on this before we started recording, but like with the extremes, in some instances you kind of need to go either one extreme or another. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that using a silicone shampoo or using a sulfate shampoo is like, you're not going to see that much of a difference in your overall health, if like that's what you're worried about, as far as like endocrine disruption or things that like people are literally worried about with silicones,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah, silicone's pretty inert. I mean, that's what your Diva cup is made out of, or
right.
breast implanter. It's pretty biologically stable.
Right. So I think that the fear around that is a little bit misplaced. But if you're that worried about it, just stop shampooing your hair. Like as long as you don't develop some sort of like fungus or whatever. Like I know a lot of people, especially surfers, right?
Mhm.
That they're just like, oh, I don't use shampoo. Like I just do whatever. I think I was doing some research on it maybe a year ago
Mhm.
in that whole community. It's super interesting to read like what people think and the way that their hair is very beneficial for people with curly hair and textured hair is a no shampooing thing.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's an apple cider vinegar rinse and then some sort of egg wash or
Okay.
egg
Uh,
white wash or something. I've also heard of rice water. There's a company, I need to test it out. It's called Biore Beauty. That's really interesting. It's kind of like based off of, it's a little bit of, it's kind of whitewashing in a weird way. It's like this lady, went to the mountains of somewhere in Asia and there were these women that had like super long hair and none of them had gray hair
mhm.
and they have a kind of ritual of using this rice water like they were rice farmers as a culture. They use this rice water to rinse their hair and they don't shampoo it, they only use rice water. It's like, well, it actually makes sense. Like if you soak rice for a long time, the protein from the rice comes out
Mhm.
and is like sets in that water. And then I also believe it's kind of like either pH balance or it's a lower pH.
Mhm.
So if you're only using that to like rinse your hair, it makes sense why it's good for you. And this company, Viore Beauty, is kind of like really hammered, like attached itself to that story
Yeah.
and created a product that's like a solid shampoo bar, which I'm a fan of those. Like I hope that we start going, I think Lush has a really good one that I like
Mhm.
and I used to travel with that one. But I hope that people start doing like solid shampoo bars and conditioner bars because they're awesome. Like you don't need water as the main ingredient if your hair is already wet, kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Um, but this company does that, and that's something I need to kind of test out. I like to try everything. I try to use all the different shampoos and stuff that
Mhm.
I retail to my clients and just feel like, okay, like I understand what my hair type is, so I can understand like how does this make my hair feel, and then compare it to like what is someone's hair going to feel like when I give that to them. So like
Right.
a
Mm.
strengthening shampoo for me doesn't work. My hair is strong. I don't have a protein like issue. My hair is not blonde, so it makes my hair feel super stiff. If someone's hair is like kind of gummy and feeling bad, then that's going to be perfect for them.
Mhm. Mhm. Or
So
like even like the my ends get blonde and they get pretty bad.
yeah.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. And this is really interesting. Like when we're talking products because I don't really know what to say to patients. Like they'll come in and be like, okay, well, this is the shampoo I'm using. And it's often a natural one or one for hair loss, something like that you were mentioning before. And often like an antifungal, especially if they do have like seborrheic dermatitis, that's useful. There's a few antifungals that are useful. But yeah, and it's tough for me because I don't see the solution necessarily for hair loss being in the type of shampoo. Well, depending on what it is, but I think like what you're saying about all of the options, like there are very like strategic decisions you can make with choosing the right shampoo, and
Mhm.
it's not always the level of analysis that we assume. Like, is it natural? Is it not natural? Like, this shampoo is way better because it's got 95% natural ingredients versus this one, which is, you know,
My
um,
number one selling shampoo is just one that's literally called, I think it's called Hydrate Me. It's just
mm,
moisture.
mm,
Like that's the number one thing like most people need. Most people don't need protein. Most people don't need like a DHT blocking ingredient.
mm,
Most people don't need all of these extra things. They just need moisture. And that's literally my number one selling one of that. And then my number two selling one is called Angel Wash and Rinse, which is literally moisture light. It's almost the exact same ingredients, a little less heavy emollients and lipids. So it doesn't weigh hair down, that's like is finer in texture.
mm,
But that's really for people with super finer texture hair, like more mature women. Um,
mm.
and that's pretty much like it is super rare that I'm selling anything other than that. Like,
Yeah.
and it's for a very specific reason. It's like most people, if you get a really good quality shampoo, um, and price does not dictate quality,
Mm,
which is hard to wrap your head around, I think for a lot of people. But it's very, like, most people just need moisture.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
super simple. And what's funny is that, like, because I spend time with my clients and I make recommendations and I have long form conversations like this, and most of my conversations with them are about their hair.
Mm.
Um, at least for the first visit. And then once we get on a good path, we can kind of get into the traditional, like, hairdresser client narrative, which is how's your kids? How's your whatever? How's work? Blah, blah, blah. But
Right.
the first one is always like, let's figure out what the issue is. Because I live in Florida, there's tons of hairdressers here,
Mm.
and there's a specific reason why someone's going to seek me out because I'm new. So they're going to have an issue that I have to
Mm.
fix, basically. They're I have one client who's like, I just like you,
Yeah.
like, and that's why he liked his other hairdresser. He just likes me. And that is definitely the exception. Um,
Right.
but
They're coming to you because they're like, I need someone, a
I
fresh pair of eyes kind of thing.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
I need a fresh perspective, or I want something a little bit different, or, my hairdresser's been doing the same thing for 12 years. They're not listening to me, or whatever. It's kind of something like that. They come to me with a problem, and I have to kind of at least help to figure it out. Um, and most of the time, I would say 70% of the time, I'm like, let's just try this. I'll give you either a full bottle you can buy or a sample of this hydrate shampoo and conditioner. And they're like, oh my God, you're amazing. You're so smart. How did you figure this out? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, actually, thank you. No, I'm not. Like, it's just, um, hair is mostly made up of water. The
Mm.
more you process it with chemicals or with environmental damage or sun damage or whatever, um, the more moisture you lose. So adding moisture makes your hair soft and feel good.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
it.
And stuff that keeps the moisture in, like emollients and
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And then, so maybe we'll talk about like the DHT blocker. So DHT is, I'll just like say for the listeners, like
Yeah.
it's an androgen, so it's in the family of testosterone, but it is not testosterone. It's a product of testosterone. We don't actually know what it does. Like it doesn't necessarily have any, like testosterone has health benefits or health maintenance effects in terms of building muscle, libido, energy. But DHT, we don't know what it actually does, like biologically in the body. But that tends to, over time, it accumulates in the hair follicles and essentially causes thinning and eventually like the ends the hair follicle life cycle, and you don't get a new follicle anymore, and so the hair starts to thin, and then it's gone. And so a lot of hair loss treatments are in removing DHT from the follicle. Then you have like some of them are like oral medications like finasteride, these
Mm-hmm.
like medications for or spironolactone, so these like anti-androgen type medications.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like you said, they're not going to cause hair growth, but they may stop the loss. And some people, it's like notice. I've heard like 15% improve. Like it's a marginal improvement. It may not be clinically like wow. Um, and then Rogaine, which isn't so much a DHT blocker, but is stimulating the hair growth. And like you said, it's the only um, product that really has been shown or approved
Regrow
for
hair.
regrowing hair. Yeah, so like
Mm-hmm.
improving the follicle density and thickness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, like maybe we'll talk about the DHT blockers because that's a big one where people will be really upset about hair loss. It does seem to be androgenic alopecia in the majority of people. I think when it's kind of irreversible, like we're having a really hard time getting on top of it. And they're doing things like hair, skin, and nail supplements, which really have nothing to do with the underlying
Mm-hmm.
issue.
And they don't want to do Rogaine.
Right, and they don't want to do Rogaine, which
Yeah.
Rogaine can cause some like facial hair growth, if
For
especially if
women,
you don't
right?
like clearly wash your yeah,
Yes.
like you got to really wash your hands and make sure it's not getting anywhere. The only thing, and the thing too with Rogaine is the first couple weeks you can see more shedding from when basically the hair follicle that's in this resting phase enters telogen phase. So you sort of
It falls out.
it falls
Mhm.
out so that a new follicle can grow. So that can be alarming if you're already dealing with shedding and now you're putting some stuff. And then the other thing with Rogaine too is the texture of it. It's this foam. It's not terrible, but it has to be applied all over the scalp at least once a day. Sometimes I recommend twice a day. and it washes out fine, but it's not necessarily like you're gonna see it. You're gonna see a buildup of it on the scalp, and so to do it every single day for people to be compliant with it is tough, and you got to do it for months, and you can't stop it. That's the other thing.
Yep, because then it'll fall out.
Yeah.
Well, excuse me, TH or DHT blocking from like a product specific, non-prescription product specific perspective. So you have Rogaine, which is separate. You're talking about finasteride, and what was the other one you were saying? I forgot what that was.
Spironolactone.
Yeah, so those are, like you said, they're DHT blockers like internally. Those are things that I just simply don't deal with. You can
Mhm.
either go and see a doctor for that, or you can do, like in the States, it's called like HIMS, and there's hers, and they're like you can just kind of see an e-doctor and get a prescription like right off the bat. Um, those I do believe have side effects that
Yeah.
are more intense than anything topical. And
Yeah.
so I don't even go there. Like usually I'll say this is an option that you can talk to somebody about, but
Yeah.
just so you know that it's an option, like I'm not even touching that because there's just the side effects, and it's too, like I don't want to tell somebody how
Yeah.
to get their hands on something like that. Um but that's one way to do it from an internal, like you take it orally perspective. And it kind of, it's in the same vein in a weird way as like taking a supplement. Like supplements can cause issues too, you know, whenever you're taking anything orally. So mostly I'm dealing with topical things.
Mhm.
So my understanding of the products that I use is, first of all, there's like a anti-DHT molecule. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it blocks the expression of DHT. And then the shampoo and conditioner specifically, well, the shampoo specifically has something that will remove the DHT that has been expressed from the scalp. So
Mhm.
not only is it cleaning it, but it's specifically looking for DHT to get that off the scalp. So when it's worked in a system together, it's usually like the specific product that I recommend. And just because what I carry in my salon, it doesn't mean that that's the only thing. It's just, it's easier when you're, and I'm sure you know this with like supplements or things you keep on hand. It's
Right.
easier to work with one brand and pick the best from them, unless there's some amazing product that's from another brand, because it is hard to have all these different invoices and shipments from a bunch of different companies. So just because I'm saying what I use, it doesn't mean it's the only thing, or that's the thing that's going to work for somebody. It's just what I use. So I use Kevin Murphy, and in that system it's like a shampoo, conditioner, and a spray. And what I like about the spray is a DHT blocking spray, so it stops the expression of the DHT in the, like, from coming out of the follicle. And arguably, there's a lot of opinions on it, but arguably that is what causes the follicle to start to find, like,
Yeah.
and stuff, is the actual expression of DHT. So the
Right.
less you express DHT, the less your body is like, I need to make this. So it
Right.
kind of like tricks your body in a way of like not making
Right.
DHT because you're not using it and you're not
Yeah.
expressing it out on your scalp. So then if you are, any DHT that is being expressed is shampooed off of the actual scalp. So it's not sitting there. It's not like living in the hair, hair follicle. Shampoo doesn't really penetrate that deeply. It's really surface level. But the spray has the ability to kind of penetrate a little bit deeper. But it's also has densifying properties. So not only is it like blocking DHT at the source, and helping in that way, but it also does feel a little bit like your follicles are thicker, but without being too drying. So this is, again, this is for a very specific client. It's expensive.
Mhm.
Like system, I believe it's for the shampoo, conditioner, and spray. It's about $100.
Mhm.
It lasts you about 2 months. Like it's
Mhm.
expensive in the
Like
beginning.
Dr. Shapiro is a similar type of thing. I don't know what you think of that, but yeah, it has it's again shampoo, conditioner, topical. Yeah.
Yeah,
With
so
yeah.
systems like that, like they can work if that's the issue. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like if that is the problem. And I'm actually in the phase of retesting that exact system, because I am experiencing hair loss again. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to,
Yeah.
I'm trying to go back in like kind of treat this as a weird blessing in disguise of like, okay, I'm gonna go through this through my client's eyes. I'm gonna use like my own medicine on
Mhm.
myself, medicine in quotes, like
Yeah.
use
Yeah,
my
totally.
own on myself and just see like how it works. But especially for post birth
Mhm. Mhm.
women, but not breastfeeding. So I never, and I don't make recommendations, like I said, for prescriptions or anything like in that realm. But what I do is I usually tell women to wait until they're done breastfeeding um to do anything, because usually the hair loss post baby
Mhm.
is it's less if you breastfeed for at least like 3 to 6
Mhm.
months. If you breastfeed your child, it's way less, because like when you're pregnant, your body is like stops the telogen phase
Mhm.
completely, and
Mhm.
it's only growing hair, and that's why you're like, oh my god, my hair's
Yeah.
amazing, my skin's amazing, I'm glowing, it's a baby glow. It's because your body's like, I'm growing a being, everything's growing, your hair's going to grow long. And then if you don't breastfeed, those hormones just go boom,
Mm.
completely stop. And that's not to shame anybody or whatever choices you make, but like there again, there's kind of like a system
Mhm.
that your body goes through. Then if you breastfeed for a certain amount of time and you slowly kind of taper off, your hormones do the same thing, and
Mhm.
your hair kind of goes along with that cycle. Where
Right.
if you have somebody who gives birth, they decide not to breastfeed, or they're not able to breastfeed for whatever reason, there's a huge switch and a lot of hair falls out at once. A
Yeah.
lot.
And
But
it's like the
it
hair
does
you would
usually
have
grow back.
lost throughout those 9 months,
Exactly.
but
It
it's
does usually,
upsetting.
it's
Yeah.
upsetting, and it does usually grow back. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yep.
right. Because it's like you had this 9 months of bliss where your hair was awesome,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
all of a sudden, all at once, you're getting clumps, but ultimately, it all balances out to 0. It's just
Mhm.
an emotional roller coaster
Right.
ultimately. Yeah. I mean, there's also one thing I'm recommending to my patients a lot more for the DHT alopecia. So first of all, the telogen effluvium piece was really interesting to me because like it's like you still need to consider that and address that just in case it's happening, because there are nutrient deficiencies that are common, like which we'll probably talk about, but vitamin D, iron, big ones, and those are really common for hair loss. Intelligent effluvium, thyroid issues could be another reason why someone has that stress. A lot of weight loss. Like, yeah, sometimes I have to have the conversation between like, you know, your weight loss diet. If your body settles into the weight it likes after the end of a weight loss diet, then you may stop the telogen effluvium. Like once the body's like, okay, like things are cool. But sometimes when it's persistent, it may mean that this is not your set point weight. You know, especially if you're struggling to keep it there. Sometimes we have to have a conversation around, you know, maybe you're not eating enough for your body, and maybe your weight loss goals are not in alignment with your hair goals. You have to choose one, you know. Um, but then with the DHT, one thing I'm recommending is to do scalp massages, because there can be like the papillary muscle can be in spasm, especially when we're stressed out, and it can accumulate DHT. You said this too, that it's sometimes not how much DHT we make, because a few years ago I was experiencing hair loss and I was like, oh, I want to test my DHT levels. Very expensive test to do. It's about $70 to test it, just that one marker. And I was actually low below the range. And so it doesn't have much to do with your serum levels, like your blood levels, more so how sensitive your scalp is to DHT, which could be a genetic component to that. And then how much is actually at the follicle itself, not in your blood. And so, like a scalp massage can help massage and relax the papillary muscles and then release some of the DHT. People will do like microneedling, things like that. Yeah. I don't know if, and I've anecdotally, I've seen like a lot of good results from that, which is also maybe why some of the topical things are helpful too. Like whatever you do, if you're really spending time to massage and do that self care, that maybe it's helping to break down some of the DHT and release it from the follicle.
Have you heard of PRP?
You're muted.
Okay. So what I was going to ask if you've heard of PRP. It's like
Mm-hmm.
platelet rich plasma. I know that that's something that people do.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor does it in the doctor's office that I work with. It's also known, they do it for facials too. It's like a vampire facial. They like take your own blood, run your blood and then kind of re-inject it in there.
Mhm.
And it's all to stimulate like younger blood and kind of like refresh that area. Um, but actually I have a brush, and maybe I'll like send you the link for this brush. It's a bamboo brush, but it's with it has metal bristles
Okay.
instead of like, and they're like nubbed metal bristles, and they're cooling. They kind of like feel cool on your scalp, and it's just very like methodical. It feels very relaxing, and that's really good
Mm,
um to brush and stimulate that way. And I kind of like move it around and do
mm,
stuff like that to stimulate, like stimulating blood flow on your scalp with either massage or brushing can also increase like blood supply to the scalp, which can
yeah.
in turn help with hair growth, can help with, you know, certain things. And yeah, I think that massage of all kinds is so beneficial. Like
Mm.
even using like going into skincare, like the gua sha or whatever, that little like jade piece,
Oh
and
yeah.
you self massage on your face and things like that is really can be very helpful. You can also go kind of into your hairline as well
Mm,
um
mm.
with that. So
Yeah, because it's like even if the issue, let's say it's low iron, so
mhm.
we're taking iron internally, raising blood levels of iron, but if the muscles are in spasm, and there's not going to be blood flowing to and nourishing the actual scalp. It's the same thing with like tense muscles in the body. Like if you have a muscle knot or there's like trapped fascial adhesions, you're not getting nutrition to those areas, water, release of toxins, all of that stuff. So it's like and we're so stressed and tense that our muscles are hypertonic, and in the scalp is where we hold like we hold a lot of tension in the jaw, and we hold a lot of tension in the scalp and the neck and shoulders, and so all that can trap like chi or prana from flowing into the scalp. And so these practices are useful even just as like a self-care ritual to just kind of
Totally. And it doesn't
bring.
take a long time.
Yeah.
Another thing is like how to properly brush your hair. And this can also contribute to hair loss. Is like you start, do you release a video version of this?
Yeah,
Or is
this
it
is
just
gonna be
audio?
on. Yeah, this is
Okay, let me grab that brush. I'll do a little demo because this
yeah,
is
sure.
actually really good.
Right, so this is for the YouTube people. If you're listening on the
Okay.
podcast, you
Well,
can.
I'll kind of like explain these, and maybe we
Yeah.
can like I'll send a picture of these. So what I actually decided to grab is like three brushes. So what I have here are, they all have different uses. So this brush, it kind of looks like a mouse, and
Uh-huh.
it's like
I can
nice
see
in
your
your
mouth.
hand. It's
Yeah.
plastic. And I don't know if you can see, but the actual bristles are all different sizes. So there's three
Mm,
different sizes, and they're kind of like staggered throughout there. This is my go-to brush for people with curly hair.
mm,
Um, and it's also rounded, so it shapes your head, and you can do like a nice massage here. It feels very good, but it is a little bit pokey. So
mm,
like my ideal brush would be like a hybrid of these two together. Maybe I'll need to invent something like that. But
uh-huh.
that's this one. It's really good. It's great for travel because it doesn't take up a whole lot of space. And this one is by IQ. They make a lot of really good curly hair products, and they're not very expensive. I think this retails for like 22 bucks
Oh, sweet.
USD, so probably 25
Yeah.
Canadian dollars. Available on Amazon. This
Mm,
is a very good brush. And this is like kind of the standard brush that you're gonna get if you go to a salon. It's called a wet brush. This is for someone with long hair. They kind of revolutionized this brush. It's a vented brush, which means that there's like a little hole in here so mold doesn't grow inside. But also these little nodules are very like fragile, so they're flexible. So if your hair is soaking wet, to detangle your hair, they're not going to like rip your hair out. They're
mm.
going to kind of softly,
They're gonna give before your hair.
yeah, give before your hair, so it's not going to rip chunks out. This is really good. Um,
Those are the ones like
for
I used to play with a lot because you press in the middle and all the spokes go in.
come
And
together,
yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So this, and I do like this company. These are really, this is called the Wet Pro, but this is like, um, really reasonable. I think these are like $10 or
Mhm.
something. Like it's super cheap. But this is good, but it's kind of like you want something maybe a little bit more firm. But this is great if someone, they don't like, their hair is fine, you know, their hair is good, they just have long hair, like maybe your length of hair, medium to long hair. They want something to detangle either in the shower or as soon as they get out of the shower. And this is that brush. It's great.
I use an Afro pick after the shower.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that
cool
way,
because
yeah.
that makes sense because it's like
Just like kind of just
it's
straighten everything.
wide.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a wide tooth comb. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah.
So then this is the one I was talking about specifically. So this
Uh-huh.
has these, it's rounded. So it's actually the opposite to the other one. It's rounded. And then the little things are exactly the same, almost exactly the same as the wet brush, but the little nubs on the end are like way smaller.
Hmm.
And they look pokey in the camera, but they're actually rounded at the end and they're firm, but because of the way that the brush is designed, they're flexible. But
Hmm.
what I like about this is if you put it in your hand, it is firm and up against your scalp, it's firm. So when you're detangling, it'll give, but when it's up against your scalp, it's more firm. So it's kind of, it's a little hybrid kind of those two. And this is a bamboo one. I like bamboo because it's like sustainable, which is cool. And then I believe that these are just like aluminum, and this is also vented. So all of that to say, when you brush your hair, and my hair's super long, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
kind of roll myself back from my desk here so you can see all of my
Okay.
hair. It is super
Yeah.
long. I
Yeah.
need a haircut, actually. So when you brush your hair, most people kind of start here and pull down. This is not great because your hair actually tangles from the ends. And like we talked about earlier, like this is your non-keratinized hair. It's like the most sensitive. So you're really like yanking, and actually you're creating knots and tangles like in the mid, we call this a mid shaft, but like the mid section of your hair. So what you want to do is you want to start at the ends, and the ends is where the tangles always is. So
Mm,
I always like kind of grab a little bit, start down here, and then move your way up, kind of
mm.
go here. That's where you know you can kind of get some of your the back end, and you know you can hear a little bit of like
Crook. Yeah.
crunch crunch, but
Yeah.
you don't want to hear like a rip. That's
Yeah.
like no, like take your time, you know, and kind of move it into your, like I like to rub it against my palm because then I know I'm not like
Yeah.
yanking it too much. And then eventually you get up to the kind of the scalp area and you see it, you know, kind of
Yeah.
hold it because there's still, I'm like working all those knots out of my hair. And also I definitely need to wash my hair,
Getting
and
so
it's
shiny though. Looks
oh
so.
it's because I
Yeah.
haven't washed it. It's just greasy.
And you're just splitting all the natural oils.
Yeah, exactly, which is
Yeah.
this is great for that too, you
Yeah.
know? This, like if you brush your hair every night, you won't have to shampoo your hair as often because you're kind of taking the oils from your scalp and moving them down. So
Mm.
then what I do, and this just feels so good, like
Yeah.
seriously, especially with this one, is I kind of rub it around my scalp. And I you don't have to pull it all the way down, but
Mm.
I just kind of like move it around my scalp, and you know, you
Mm.
can see like now that my hair is back, you can see my little like M shape here,
Mm.
right where my hair loss was. And I'm kind of move it around, and then I like to split my hair down the middle and then do the one side
Mm.
and kind of, I don't know, I'll do that for like 2 minutes and then I'll pull it down to the other side. But if you see, like I had cleaned my brush the other day, this is like a normal kind of half of my head. I've
Yeah.
got maybe like
3 strands or something.
3 or
Yeah.
4 strands in there. Yep. But and for the majority of them are long. Like if
And that's actually like, yeah. So for people who are wondering, like for
yeah.
telogen effluvium, if you just sort of run your fingers through your hair and pull out one out of every 30 hairs, like
Mhm.
then that is sort of part of the one of the signs of it. Like when you're just kind of going, like it's called the tug test. So you
Uh-huh.
find like a section of hair, you kind of run your fingers through, and if some fall out,
Mhm.
because often, yeah, if you have long hair, you can have hair that's fallen, but it's just kind of in the rest of your hair, like what you're
Yes.
finding,
Yes.
like
Well,
you're
now I gotta brush
combing
the
and
other
it's coming
side.
out, or you're shampooing and everything that fell out throughout the last 3 days or whatever,
Right. Right.
is falling. So but some patients will be like, I don't shampoo my hair because it causes hair loss. But I'm like,
Yeah,
it's
and it's
already
like,
fallen.
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and also like, you know, again with the aggravation, like you don't want like a dirty scalp can also kind of like aggravate your,
Mhm.
you know, your hair loss too. So like,
Right.
you know, you don't want to fear what's going on in the shower. Like you have to tackle whatever it is that's going on. So sorry, just
The
the microphone out. But yeah,
microphone.
this side had a little more, but I would say like
Mm.
all in all, I'm brushing my hair and maybe like 20
Mm.
strands are falling out. I also didn't brush my hair last night,
Yeah.
so
You have
you
really
know,
long hair.
I'm
Yeah.
not freaking out about it, but I'm still like I said, I'm kind of monitoring again my own hair loss, and mostly around my face with the little baby hairs coming out. And I pulled it out, and there's like,
Mhm,
I would
mhm,
say there's a total of 20 hairs. I'm not gonna like
mhm.
panic, but I also like I clean my brush once a week, so I can kind of monitor like what does my brush look like before I
Yeah,
clean it, and is it normal, and you know
right. Yeah, and what's coming out. Yeah. Yeah, I think before a shampoo, like it was with COVID, I'm not really shampooing as often.
right.
Summertime. So yeah, I'll notice way more falling.
Yeah. But
And
you
then
should detangle your hair before you shampoo,
okay.
actually. So if
Yeah.
you brush your hair before you get in the shower and wash your hair, you'll notice too that it will feel less scary because
Mm,
your hair is the most fragile when it's wet. So even like using a wet brush, like if you can wait to brush your hair out, you could just kind of what we call finger detangle or use a pick, some wide tooth combs. They make those super wide ones that you can hang in the shower. Those are really good, but not for your scalp. You want to
yeah.
like use it to just kind of detangle, just not even the mid shafts in the shower, but just the ends.
Yeah.
But really, like if you detangle your hair before you get in the shower, um you're going to have less strand fallout because what hair wants to tangle around itself, you
Mhm,
know
mhm.
and you're also going to get like kind of more luster overall because you kind of like pulled all those natural oils away from your scalp, so you won't have to use as much shampoo to get that clean feeling, but you're also not stripping all of the natural oils 100% away from your scalp.
Yeah, this is good. I'm gonna get that brush, the
Oh,
metal.
it's very good. Yeah, it's just
Or
the bamboo with, I'll send you the link. There's a
yeah,
hairstylist that sells them. I think
I'll
it's
put
like,
the link in the show notes for
yeah,
people.
I think it's like $30, and you can find some like knockoffs if you want to use Amazon. It's pretty like,
And maybe we'll talk to you about the nutrient deficiencies because I know that's obviously like that's like my
right,
angle.
right.
Although I think it's important that we talk about the other stuff first because it's not always that, and
Yes.
it's very specific reasons. I mean, iron deficiency, common, super common. Iron's not a sexy deficiency
No. And
because
well,
everybody
vitamin
has it.
D, I think we're
Yeah,
finding is also way more common and is going to be more common now. The other
yeah,
thing that I've noticed, and I guess I'll just go on a little
yeah,
ramble here, but
yeah,
um trials are just now starting. I believe they started like not just now starting, they're restarting, but a lot of a big clinical trial was starting right before COVID, going into anesthesia gases and the effects that they have on hair loss. I have a client who was in an insane motorcycle accident. He had like 4 surgeries in a very short amount of time. He's losing a lot of hair, but it's quickly coming back. So he's losing short strands, long strands. There's no spotting. There's no like traction alopecia going on. It's just literally overall hair shedding. It's anesthesia, and your body holds on to anesthesia. Now they're figuring out like anywhere from 6 months to 2 years it can stay in your body,
mm,
and they're still not sure what is the different gases or the different things that they use on you to put you under that causes hair loss, but like it is a trauma to your body. It is very intense to have surgery, and we're lucky with anesthesia makes it less intense, but like that can cause hair loss. So
yeah,
I usually
shock.
ask people like it's some sort of shock or any big shock to your system. Like I had kidney stones,
Mm,
so there's a very good chance that because I had kidney stones and I had lithotripsy, that like my hair loss could be
mm,
part of that because I went under, and now for whatever reason just now I'm burning off that. Another thing is weight loss. Like a lot of our hormones are stored in fat. When you do a lot of fat loss, like hair falls out. A big one is keto. Um Keto makes people's hair fall out like crazy. Usually once their body kind of levels out, it starts to grow back, but it also can be like it's a little hairy, like little like sketchy with that. Thyroid issues, usually what I see with people that have came back to me and said like I got my blood test and my thyroid's weird, is that's when the weird hairs that grow in, like they're either like red. With someone who's blonde, they have like a red hair, and someone like me, like I'm getting some thyroid testing done. I had a couple of random like thick,
mm,
super thick black curly hairs, like, and they pop out because that's not my natural texture.
yeah.
um so any things like that. The other things are any intense grief, any loss of life, any loss of family, or any stress taxing on your system is a big thing that, it's a shock, a big shock. And usually it sorts itself out once you kind of deal with all of that stuff, and that's stress related hair loss.
Yeah.
That's not like I'm stressed out at work and I've been in a stressful job for 5 years. It's like a little bit different than that. It's like a huge stressor that's happening right at this moment. And then the
Yeah.
hair loss follows. You notice it 6 months afterwards.
Yeah, and that's often like we can point to it. Intelligent effluvium is reversible. Like it will come back as long as
Right.
you address the cause. So it's
Yes.
different from the androgenic alopecia, which is not so like you'll get the hair regrowth,
Hmm.
you'll get the little baby hairs growing. So another question I always ask, right, is like, do you have baby hairs growing to people who are experiencing hair loss? It can help us differentiate what's going on. And then with a lot of nutrient deficiencies, it's and same with thyroid issues. There's often an issue with the hair texture itself, like it's
Hmm.
breathing more easily, it's maybe not growing as well.
Hmm.
And so you're seeing essentially like there's a deficiency in the ability of the body to make hair, because to our body, I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, hair is sort of the cherry on top of the sundae. It's not necessary for our survival, so it's got to
No,
divert resources to whatever else needs them,
exactly.
like whatever's getting us out of danger kind of thing. Which is also why, like that, and you brought this up at the very beginning, our hair, skin, and nails are really good markers of something shifting, because they may be the first things to shift when
Hmm.
our health shifts, because our body starts to devalue them at the expense of other organs. And so you may see changes there first. So, on the one hand, it's like an aesthetic concern, but on the other hand, it's also useful for health as a health marker. So, it's not just vanity that makes them important to pay attention to. Um, yeah, and that, like where it comes to those kind of things that you were listing off, a lot of that is like helpful to just do a workup with a doctor, naturopath.
Yeah, just yeah, get blood work done, just general
Yeah.
blood work, and just say to them like, I'm experiencing hair loss and I want to check all of these specific things. It's in
Mhm.
the States, it's called like a full smack. I don't know,
Yeah.
it's usually like 300 or $400 for
Mhm.
that full range of testing. That's without insurance. Um, most insurances cover the whole workup. Um, and then they can go into like most people have low vitamin D, and that can be a huge change right off the bat. And then iron, like you said, most people get iron and then with a vitamin C together, because vitamin C helps your body better absorb iron. I'm
Mhm.
sure you know that.
Mhm.
And which overall improves your immune system and kind of just it can quickly elevate someone's health like very quickly.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, with it is so hard with hair loss. Like it's one of those things because you don't want to feel so vain. Like I think we kind of have this weird like shame about like the vanity of your hair, but it is so important to especially women, like
Yeah.
everybody, but
It
like
is.
especially women, like it's very important.
It's probably the most like emotionally, oh, I don't want to say that, but it's a very emotionally troubling symptom, hair
Yeah.
loss. Like it's very that's some of my most motivated patients come in with hair loss, right? Like they really want to get better. It's really
Mhm,
upsetting, something they think about every day, which again adds to the stress.
mhm,
But and yeah, here in Canada too, probably like a full comprehensive blood work. Like I would test somebody's, you want to test like a CBC of their blood. You want to do fasting glucose and insulin. Make sure there's no insulin resistance. That could be another component. Like, is the body getting nourishment? Like, if you can't grow things, vitamin D, iron, a thyroid panel, sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. That would be about $300 to $400 as well. But you get a really great comprehensive blood work that now you have as baseline, and
mhm,
we have lots of info we can derive from that. In addition to the symptoms, right? Like how the hair is actually occurring to you, like how the hair loss is showing up.
mhm,
Um, yeah, and it's worth. I mean, that kind of workup. Like it's so interesting in that in your beauty school, that example of the nails, that actually had a deeper condition that was underlying that change in nails. And it wasn't even necessarily bothering the client. It was more this change that when you visit someone regularly who's paying
mhm.
attention to this part of your body, they can help provide this feedback to you, which is really helpful.
Even just moles, like you
Yeah.
never know what, like you don't know what the back of your head looks like. And unless you're running your fingers through your hair on a regular basis, you're not going to notice a mole. But if you're getting a haircut, which
Mm,
almost everybody gets a haircut, and you can see something like that's, I don't know what's taught in Canada for cosmetologists, but in the United States, we get taught all about the difference between cancerous and non-cancerous moles. We
cool.
get taught all of that stuff. And again, we can't diagnose, but we know enough to be like, hey,
Mm,
this looks, you don't I can't even say that this looks weird. Mentally, I'll be like, huh, that looks a little bit odd. And then you can say to someone like, hey, you got this spot on your head. You might just want to check it out
mm,
next time you go to your doctor or something, and they'll be like, oh, that's interesting. We Most of them are like, will you take a picture of it for me? And I'm like, yeah, because who's looking at the back of their own head?
yeah.
Nobody.
It's a good point. And it's actually really great that it's taught in schools because you are probably the first line to detect that, to detect those changes, to have the expertise in observation too. Like you've run your fingers through so many people's hair and that same person's hair that if you feel changes to the follicle or the hair growth or density, you're gonna be the first one to notice,
Hmm. Like
or
I have a
corroborate what someone already notices. Yeah.
And what's interesting is like I do the doctor that I work in her office. I do her hair. I started doing her hair about a month ago, and I switched up her. She had a really stressful thing happen to her as one, but two, she switched up her I switched up her shampoo. She had an allergic reaction. I was pretty sure it was an allergic reaction. And she is a doctor, and she was like, "I don't know. I've never had any sort of allergy ever." She's like almost 80 years old. And so she was sure that wasn't the problem. So the next time I did, like, this is just a shampoo blow dry type of situation. So I'm only using a couple of products. So the next time I used the shampoo I used the first time I ever did her hair, conditioner, and then didn't use any products when styling the hair. And she was like, "Oh, my it's sensitive, but it's not itchy." And she was experiencing like a shedding of hair, like, and it was a significant amount. And then the next time, the third time, same whatever, no hair loss had stopped, right? The excessive hair loss had stopped. The scalp wasn't irritated and red, and she was no longer um itching her scalp. Now, this is an example of me
Mhm.
deducing that I use a different shampoo with different fragrance. Fragrance is a huge allergen.
Mm.
And so the one that I used instead had a different fragrance. And maybe it was fragrance, maybe it was one of the emollients or whatever, but she had some sort of visceral reaction to that, and now it's gone. And so, and she is a doctor, and she diagnoses and she treats people. But because of, what I'm working with and the way that I'm seeing the world, I'm kind of able to say, okay, well, that can be some sort of like extreme reaction. So let's try what we tried that worked, and no problems. So
And
kind of
that's honestly what diagnosis is, anyways. It's just like repeated observations and curiosity of like, what could this be? And then a bit of trial and error, right? Like
uh-huh.
to figure out like, okay, what did we change? What did we do? I mean, sure, if you talk to like most primary care physicians, so much of their practice is like changing people's laundry detergent and saying switch your
Yeah.
shampoo up and
Right.
like what changed, like that's a big question, right? It's like, okay, when did this start? What was going on around the time? With hair though, the question is like, what was going on 3 to 6 months before now,
Hmm.
you know and often you get the answer, maybe in like a good chunk of cases you'll get the answer, um which most people don't know, right? Like you're like, well, nothing changed when I started noticing the hair loss. But when you frame it as a phenomenon where you need to start looking backwards a few months, then it becomes something like, oh, right, I did keto, or in my
Yeah.
case, I did intermittent fasting for a while, and I was so excited, so proud of myself because I need to eat right when I wake up. Like, it's like sleep is a time machine to breakfast.
Hmm.
I was like, I'm proud, I'm doing it, I'm pushing through, I'm feeling okay, and then I was like, a bunch of hair just started falling like crazy. I'm like, this is not worth
And
it.
there's a lot of, I mean, it can work for a lot of women, but like, I mean, I was like that. I did keto, I did intermittent fasting, and I felt amazing.
Hmm.
But my hair was falling out, and I got kidney stones. Like, whoa, that's not a good sign, right? Like, like I was thin,
Right.
and I did feel the energy, and like I felt physically better, but like that can't be the solution
Mhm.
because, you
Yeah,
know,
your
of this
body's like,
of
"I hate this, and
yeah,
I'm gonna."
my body's like, no way. I think what works with most people, I follow a couple of doctors and have looked into it more. Like women, we're just our hormones are so sensitive. So I think if you do like the 7 and 7 rule, like try to eat between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and
Mhm,
just kind of, and maybe even you can do a little bit of intermittent fasting in that time, like, you know, maybe you eat your breakfast and then you stop eating at like 5 or
mm,
6 or something. You're still kind of fasting. It's kind of the most seems to be the most beneficial. But what's also super interesting is that like 72-hour water fasts are weirdly less stressing on your body and hair loss than every single day, like intermittent fasting for like, you know, eating in an 8-hour window or eating in a 6-hour window. It's kind of the body's interesting that way.
yeah. It makes sense because there's an adaptation that takes place, but I mean, this is the whole idea with this is like an aside, obviously, but like with mixing things up in the body, right? Like not always just going for an hour jog, but lifting weights and doing different things because it keeps the body adapting. But
Mhm.
with intermittent fasting, maybe that adaptation, the constant request for adaptation is stressing it out beyond what you can handle because you probably already have a billion other stressors going on. This is the thing, it's like we don't always see those things as a stressor that gets added onto your busy morning, rushing the kids to whatever thing they have, dealing with, you know, whatever relationship issues you're dealing with. So, yeah. And our hormones don't, we psychologically want to see big results, like that keeps us motivated, so we want to see a couple pounds a week lost or a big amount of weight loss, something to keep us motivated. But our bodies, like female hormone systems like estrogen and progesterone, they don't love major changes because to the body that's something drastically changed in the environment, that's a stressor, especially
Mhm.
when it relates to food scarcity. So your body's like, okay, get rid of like all these resources going to the
Yeah.
hair and don't worry about like stable mood or all that, like focus, concentration, libido, like all that stuff is nonsense. Focus on survival. Maybe don't even menstruate because we need to make sure that we're going to get through this famine alive. You know,
Right.
so we just focus, like, you know, and then we get all these symptoms. But so yeah, it's important not to chase specific health outcomes that may not have the holistic well-being of your body in mind, you know, like
Yeah. And
it,
it's harder to do it that way. It's
yeah,
harder to say like that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now
yeah,
is being like, okay, this didn't work for me. I'm in this point and I
yeah,
need to figure out something that is more like balanceable and you
yeah,
know, makes sense.
yeah,
Makes
totally.
more sense. It's like taking the longer way
The
to
long way.
get to the finish line. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the longer wait, and also maybe like there's also a rebalancing phase that
Mm,
often sucks. That's where we feel maybe more tired or we gain a bit more weight, like our set point weight goes up a bit, and or maybe there's a hormonal imbalance that needs to be uncovered, and so we will often get frustrated with ourselves or feel shame or self-criticize when we're actually in an adjustment phase that could maybe last up to a year, like it can last a while. But often what we do, I've done this, is to overcompensate, like, oh my gosh, I don't like where this is headed. I'm going to try and dig in and try and reverse it. But then that's actually undermining what the body's trying to do, which is maybe
mm,
gain some weight or retain some water in the short term to feel safer. And then it starts to like the metabolism starts to shift. But it's also hard to know. This is the thing. Same thing with hair loss. It's like, because we're sort of pointing in a direction. We're like, okay, so you got low vitamin D,
mm,
we're going to supplement vitamin D. You got lots of stress. Here's some strategies. I want to make sure you're eating more protein. Let's do scalp massages. Okay, here's our strategy. This is enough because if I add more, it's going to be super overwhelming. So let's do this. We're going to check in a couple months, just make sure you're okay with everything that's going on. But we might not see any results at that point. And then we check in at 6 months and we see, like, okay, is there improvement? You know, and we're, you know, we also need to be really aware of tracking because 6 months, the amount of improvement in 6 months may not be a, like a dopamine hit of improvement where you get really
right.
excited. It may just be like, oh right, oh yeah, not as much as falling out. and there's a little bit of regrowth.
Yeah, and you need to have somebody, like, it's good to have somebody to check in
Yeah,
on that stuff because you're kind of like, "Oh, yeah, that's right, like, this is better than it was at whatever time." Like,
totally. Yeah,
so
which is also where like hairdressers can come in because you're like, oh, I'm noticing a change. I only see you once every month or every 2 months. So for me, it's a big difference. Whereas for you, you see your hair every day. Maybe you're focusing on it every day, and so you're not going to see those changes.
yeah, and for some people, like, I have a client who, like, she has a lot of hair, it's very thick, it's very dense, um, and when I first saw her, I was like, "Oh, are you, like, um, you know, experiencing hair loss or anything?" And she's like, "Oh my god, no, I just shed like crazy." I'm like, "Wow, yeah, you do." And she's like almost 70 years old, so she fully knows her body. Like she
Mhm.
knows her hair. And she's like, "Oh, I just no, I shed like a dog. Like I just shed so much hair all the time." And it's true. Like I wasn't noticing any like any patches, any like
Mm.
movement. Now she's been my client for almost a year. Like I don't see any change, but she just sheds like literally like a lot.
Uh-huh.
And it's also interesting too, so it's like
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I've had that too. Like patients, I'll ask about hair, right? Just again, it's a health marker, and they're like, "Oh, a lot falls out, but I'm good." Like my ponytail, the ponytail thickness is a
yeah,
huge
the ponytail
marker.
thickness can matter. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
Except
like
for with the baby. Except for
right,
baby. That's the thing.
right, right, exactly. Where you gather it, and you're like, yeah. At one point after intermittent fasting, I would circle a elastic twice, and then it went to 3 times. I'm like,
Oh yeah. That's
yeah,
a lot.
yeah,
Shit.
I was like, well, that was like upsetting, and it is really upsetting when you're experiencing that. You want it fixed today, and it takes
Mhm.
a few months to fix it. Like all you can really do, it's almost like where mindfulness is helpful. You're like, okay, what could have changed? What could be going on? The detective work, come up with a plan, and then let it go and just follow your plan. But
Yep.
yeah, right. I
Awesome.
like we could talk about so much more because there's
I know.
other topics on the docket, but
Yeah.
I maybe we'll do part two because this was really
Yeah.
good, and I need to eat. My blood sugar's like,
That's okay. I need to eat too. I'm like trying to like sneak these little blueberry or blackberries in.
yeah,
But yeah, this was so good.
yeah. Any last thoughts? Any last things you want to end off with? We'll put show notes where people can find you and get in touch. If they're in Florida, they'll get, or if they're from Florida, they'll get a haircut. But even to like pick your brain, and you're gonna have some content coming up about
Yeah, I'm gonna have content coming up, and especially like in the onset of COVID, I did a lot of like consulting, which is kind of funny to do like virtually, but that's also an option for people is they can set up a time with me. You can contact me via Instagram and just say, "Hey, I'm interested in whatever." I do like an hour for 50 to $100 depending on like what the situation is. And then we just literally go through everything. And for most people, they need one session and then that's it. And they just kind of want me to go like listen to the problem and see like what is it. Most people I come up with a hair care routine for them. And it's either like showing me what they already have. I like this, I don't like this, I don't like that, and then me kind of organizing that for them. So like, okay, you're gonna like, for example, you have blonde hair, but you need protein, but now your hair feels like straw. What does that mean? That means too much protein in the hair. So we're gonna get rid of the protein shampoo and conditioner, keep your protein mask that you probably have already bought, and get you moisture shampoo conditioner. Once a week use a protein mask. Usually that works.
Mm.
Add in whatever. Oh, sometimes I curl my hair. Okay, heat protectant spray.
Mm.
That's it.
This is
So and
awesome. Yeah.
then create that. And I have like a little, I can send you the kind of the information, but I have like a little triangle, kind of shows like the foundation of how to pick your hair care products. And most people need two. And if someone just changes up their shampoo and conditioner, they find that they don't need as many other hair products.
Mm.
So your shampoo conditioner is the foundation, and then everything else is kind of like just tweaking it. It's like spice, adding a
Hmm.
little,
Like
like
moisture
you're saying
protection.
about the serum. I want a little
Yeah.
serum for my ends.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll use like a texture if I want some extra like beachy waves, or a dry shampoo. Not all the time, only when needed. And you shouldn't have your shower be filled with like a bunch of different shampoos,
Yeah.
conditioners, treatments. the spells and potions. Like it's just very streamlining it. And then when you streamline that, if you're having any other issues, sometimes too, that can help to come up with some sort of solution. So
Yeah, this is good. It's like, yeah, someone invests in a consultation and then they're like, you actually save money in the long run because you have less stuff. You
less
detox.
stuff, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's generalized knowledge
Mhm.
is what I'm doing. I'm less like products. I usually give people like these are certain brands that I like me
Yeah.
personally. But then there's different tiers too. Like there's high-end salon quality shampoo, and that's something that's over $30 a bottle. So an investment is shampoo conditioner is going to run you like 60 to 70 bucks. That's a lot. Usually those are highly concentrated, so you don't need as much, and you are incorporating the brushing and you're incorporating like other stuff, so you're washing your hair less. You end up spending more money, but it's not significantly more. Then there's kind of like the mid-tier, still professional. um it's anywhere from 15 to $20 a bottle, so it's like 30 or 40 bucks. That's going to be good for 2 to 3 months, and that's a pretty average. And then there even you can go to whatever CVS, Walgreens, I don't know what kind of drugstores you guys have in Canada, but there's even some choices that you can make there that are just like better if like this is your budget and that's realistic. And I'm not the person who's going to say like don't do that. I was helping clients color their own hair with box dye over Skype. Like I'm definitely not the person who's going to tell you not to do that there, but there's a way to make the best choice with whatever budget you have. So
That's so cool. That's really good. I think I'm going to take you up on this offer because that's
oh yeah,
actually like a huge part of it is just knowing like how to navigate it. Like one part is getting cuts and styles,
yeah,
but how do you work with your hair on a day-to-day basis, I think is really helpful to know. And then once it's simplified and strategic, it's sort of like a naturopathic plan. Like you don't have to
exactly.
Google anymore. You're good. Like it's taken care of, you know?
And then from there you kind of have the like the questions. I do a similar thing with makeup too. It's like most people want just the basics. What's like I just kind of want to make my face look a little bit more like, I don't know, better in pictures. Like easy, we'll get you a bronzer, I'm going to show you where to put it on, and we're going to enhance your eyebrows a little bit, mascara, and you're done. Like most people don't want to, you know there's like a weird shame in asking, like a glamazon makeup artist, very intimidating, when in reality most people don't want that. They just want a little bit better than what they're working with, and a little bit of a change. And so I do that as well. And then most people, like I said, do one session, they'll text me, what about this, that, and that, and that's all kind of included in that. And then maybe the second session, they'll say, I have some event coming up and I want to know how to style my own hair. What do I need? And it's like, okay, we can do that too. That's super easy and very quick. It's like once you get the first question answered, then you kind of open up the dialogue for people to be like, hey, let's talk about this. So
Yeah. And get on a plan. This is awesome. Thanks so much, Taylor. This is
yeah,
great.
thank you. This was really good. Really good.